What if your home, your safe haven, suddenly became a financial burden too heavy to bear? Imagine this: the place where you've built memories, the place you retreat to after a long day, now a source of stress and worry. This isn't just a hypothetical for many middle-class Americans, it's a harrowing reality they face every day. In the heart of America, an unseen battle rages. It's not fought with weapons or armies, but with rent checks and eviction notices. It's a battle against an invisible enemy, the escalating rent crisis. Year after year, rental prices are skyrocketing, outpacing wage growth and leaving the middle class in a precarious situation. In the last 2 decades, a staggering shift has occurred. Rental prices have surged by over 40%, while wages for the middle class have seen a modest increase of just 7%. The result? An ever-widening gap between earnings and living expenses. This chasm threatens the very foundation of the middle class, pushing many to the brink of financial ruin. Even more troubling is the fact that this crisis is not confined to one area or region. From the bustling cities on the coasts to the serene heartland, no corner of the nation is untouched. It's a nationwide issue, a silent epidemic spreading like wildfire, engulfing the middle class in a struggle for survival. This isn't about numbers or statistics, it's about real people, real families who are forced to make unthinkable sacrifices. It's about parents who skip meals so their children can eat. About families who live in fear of the next rent increase, the next eviction notice. The middle class, once the backbone of America's economy, is now trapped in a relentless cycle of rising rents and stagnant wages. They are caught in an unseen battle, fighting for their homes, their security, their very livelihoods. The struggle is real, and it's time we shed light on it. Hear it from those who are living the crisis day in, day out. Meet Jane, a dedicated nurse from Middle America. She works tirelessly, long hours, doing her part to keep our communities healthy. But at the end of the month, after the bills are paid, she finds herself choosing between groceries and rent. She's not alone. Across the country, in bustling cities and quiet towns, there are countless others, like Mike, a skilled craftsman, who's seen his rent skyrocket, outpacing his wages. He's making tough choices too, like giving up his small comforts just to keep a roof over his head. Then there's Rosa, a single mother of 2, juggling multiple jobs. Every dollar matters to her, yet the rent keeps climbing, and her paycheck just doesn't stretch far enough. Rosa, like many others, lives under the constant shadow of eviction. These are real people, not faceless statistics. They are our neighbors, our friends, our colleagues. They are the beating heart of our middle class, yet they're engaged in a silent, unseen battle every single day. Imagine, after a long day of work, coming home to the worry of unpaid rent. Imagine the stress of living paycheck to paycheck, always one unexpected expense away from disaster. This is the reality for Tom, a veteran who served his country with honor, now fighting on a different front line. He's doing everything right, working hard, and yet he's barely keeping his head above water. These are the voices from the front line. They are the voices of Jane, Mike, Rosa, Tom, and countless others. They are the voices of the unseen, unheard, and unacknowledged. They are the voices of a crisis that's been brewing for years, a crisis that's now reached a boiling point. These are not isolated stories. They are the voices of millions. Have you ever wondered how the rent crisis is impacting other aspects of life? Let's think of the rent crisis as a stone dropping into a pond. The initial splash is obvious, but the ripples that spread outwards are the unseen effects, touching corners of life you wouldn't ordinarily associate with housing. Firstly, let's consider mental health. A study conducted by the Journal of Urban Health found that people spending over half their income on rent showed higher levels of psychological distress. The constant worry of making ends meet, of potentially losing your home, can lead to sleepless nights, anxiety, and even depression. Next, we have education. It's not just about the ability to afford textbooks or school supplies. It's about stability. Children in families constantly on the move due to rent hikes or evictions struggle to maintain consistent attendance. According to a report from the National Education Association, these children are 9 times more likely to change schools during the academic year, disrupting their education and hampering their academic progress. Now let's look at the overall quality of life. When a significant portion of income goes towards rent, other aspects of life inevitably suffer. That could mean less money for nutritious food, leading to health issues. It could mean less money for transportation, making it harder to hold down a job. It could even mean less money for basic leisure activities, impacting social relationships and general happiness. These are just a few examples. But the ripple effect of the rent crisis touches every aspect of life, from our mental well-being to our children's education and from our physical health to our social interactions. It's a domino effect where one piece falling triggers a cascade, and for millions of middle-class Americans this is their reality. The rent crisis isn't just about finding a place to live, it's about the ability to live a fulfilling, stable life. The ripple effect of the rent crisis extends far beyond just housing. What's driving this crisis? Let's delve into the root causes. You see, it's not just one factor that's fueling this rent crisis. It's a complex web of interconnected issues that have been slowly brewing over the years. Let's untangle this web and shed some light on the main drivers. First up is wage stagnation. Over the past few decades, the cost of living has skyrocketed, but wages for the middle class have remained relatively flat. This imbalance between income and expenses has made it increasingly difficult for the middle class to keep up with rent payments. Next, we have housing market trends. Homeownership was once the cornerstone of the American dream. But following the housing market crash in the late 2000s, that dream began to crumble. With stricter mortgage lending rules and increasing home prices, many middle-class families found themselves stuck in the rental market. And then, there's gentrification. This trend has transformed many urban neighborhoods, pushing property values to soaring heights. As a result, long-term residents often find themselves priced out of their own neighborhoods. And where do they end up? In the rental market, where they're met with the same high rents that drove them out of homeownership in the first place. Lastly, let's talk about the supply and demand imbalance. Simply put, there aren't enough affordable rental units to meet the demand. This shortage drives up the cost of rent, making it even more challenging for middle-class families to find affordable housing. So, we've got wage stagnation, housing market trends, gentrification, and a supply-demand imbalance. These are the driving forces behind the middle-class rent crisis. And they're not just statistics or economic theories. They're real-life issues affecting real people every day. Understanding the causes is the first step towards finding solutions. Let's continue to unravel this crisis together so we can start building a future where everyone has access to affordable housing. What role does the government play in this crisis? A question that's been echoing in the minds of millions. The government, undeniably, has a significant role in the housing market. Its policies can either be a salve to soothe the crisis, or a catalyst that can exacerbate it. Let's start with how the government has helped. Through various programs, the government provides subsidies to low-income renters. These subsidies help to bridge the gap between what renters can afford and what the market demands. In addition, the government has laws in place to prevent discrimination in housing, ensuring everyone has a fair shot at securing a home. But the question remains, are these measures enough to counter the scale of the crisis? On the flip side, some of the government's policies have inadvertently contributed to the problem. For instance, zoning laws often favor single-family homes over multi-unit rentals. This restricts the supply of affordable rental units, driving up prices. Similarly, property tax policies often incentivize homeownership over renting, further skewing the market. Additionally, while subsidies and anti-discrimination laws are well-intentioned, they often fall short of their goals. Subsidies are frequently insufficient to cover the gap between rent and income, and despite the laws, discrimination in housing persists, making it harder for certain groups to find affordable housing. Moreover, the government's response to the crisis has been criticized for being reactive rather than proactive. It often steps in when the crisis has already peaked, rather than taking preventative measures. So, what's the verdict? The government undeniably plays a pivotal role in shaping the housing market. Its policies can help alleviate the rent crisis, but they can also contribute to it. The key is striking the right balance. A balance that ensures affordable housing is accessible to all, not just a select few. The government's role is pivotal, but is it doing enough? That's something we all need to ponder. So, what can be done to alleviate the rent crisis? Great question. The good news is, there are potential solutions to this conundrum. Let's dive in and explore some of these possibilities. Firstly, we can look at rent control laws. These laws limit how much a landlord can increase rent annually, hence providing some stability for tenants. But it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. Rent control needs to be implemented thoughtfully, considering the local housing market and cost of living, to ensure that it doesn't inadvertently dissuade property owners from renting out their properties or maintaining them adequately. Secondly, there's the concept of affordable housing initiatives. These are programs that aim to increase the supply of affordable housing units, either by subsidizing the construction of such units, or by offering incentives to developers to include affordable units in their projects. It's not just about building more houses, it's about building more houses that people can actually afford. And finally, we have to consider wage increases. With the cost of living constantly increasing, wages need to keep up. If people's salaries are not rising at the same rate as their rent, then it's no surprise that they're struggling to keep a roof over their heads. Increasing the minimum wage could go a long way in helping people afford their rent and other basic necessities. These solutions are not exhaustive, but they're a start. They require commitment, not just from the government, but from all of us. Landlords, tenants, employers, employees, builders, and developers. Everyone has a role to play in resolving this crisis. Each solution carries its own set of challenges, and it's important to weigh the benefits against the potential drawbacks. But the bottom line is, we cannot afford to do nothing. Solutions exist. The question is, are we willing to implement them? Let's hope that as a society, we can rise to the occasion and ensure that everyone has a place to call home. Awareness is the first step towards change. As we've journeyed through the unseen battle of America's middle-class rent crisis, we've discovered the depth of the issue, the ripple effects, the driving forces, the government's role, and the possible solutions. But what now? The answer lies in your hands, my friend. It's time to put your awareness into action, and here's how you can do it. Start by joining the conversation. Participate in local and national discussions about the rent crisis. Get informed, listen to stories, share your own, and spread the word. The power of collective voices is undeniable, and it's the foundation upon which social change is built. Advocate for policy changes. This might sound intimidating, but remember, your elected officials are there to represent you. Write to them, call them, make your voice heard. Ask for policies that protect renters, that provide affordable housing options, and that create a sustainable and equitable housing market. You can also support initiatives that help alleviate the crisis. This could mean contributing to a local housing charity, volunteering your time, or even starting an initiative of your own. It's about creating a culture of empathy and understanding where we acknowledge the struggles of our fellow citizens and take steps to help. And finally, don't underestimate the power of your vote. At every level of government, from local to national, your vote can shape the policies and the leaders that will tackle this crisis. The middle-class rent crisis is a complex issue, and there are no easy solutions. But the beauty of a democratic society is that we have the power to affect change. It starts with awareness, yes, but it doesn't end there. Remember, you don't have to do everything. But if everyone does something, we can make a real difference. You have a voice. Use it to help bring about change. The middle-class rent crisis is not an isolated issue, but a national concern. We've journeyed together through the unseen battle, hearing the voices from the front line, and understanding the ripple effect it has on our society. We've dissected the driving forces behind this crisis and scrutinized the government's role in it. We've explored possible solutions, and we've heard the call to action. This crisis is a complex puzzle, intertwining economics, policy, and human experience. It's a challenge that requires us to rethink how we approach housing, how we prioritize our resources, and how we support our middle class. It's a challenge that calls for collective action. This isn't just about the middle class, it affects us all. It shapes our communities, our economies, and our futures. It's a battle we must face together. It's a battle we can win together. Together, we can turn the tide on the middle-class rent crisis.